top secret, deep underground military bases. Do they exist? Are they science fiction? We're going to find out that yes, they do exist. And in this video, we're going to be looking at the public domain documented information that shows us the origins of the deep underground military bases that were built in the United States in the 1940s. And we're going to go up until about 1960 and look at how these bases were established. Welcome to Expanded Knowledge. My name is Anthony. Here on this YouTube channel, we explore a variety of topics that are on the kind of frontier, the edge of our known, accepted consensus knowledge. And certainly, if you look at history enough, and if you look at things that continue to happen in our society and in the government, we know that there's lots of secrets. There are actual conspiracies that become known to be what happened, and at the time they're often labeled conspiracy theories or tinfoil hat theories, yet many of these have proven to be true. You can look no further than, for example, MK Ultra. There's many more examples to cite. So on this channel, we try to just push the edge of that frontier of what's our knowledge, but do it in a way where we're being critical thinkers. And critical thinking is something that I teach at the college level. I teach critical thinking and reasoning. I'm also a history teacher. So I'm kind of coming at all these topics from that approach. But it's important always to remember that one of the number one qualities of a true critical thinker is open-mindedness, as well as humility, meaning being humble and knowing that how little we do know. Okay? So without getting into it too much here, before we dive into the deep underground military bases, also referred to as DUMBs, I think it's important to keep that in mind. And something I just want to communicate about this channel is we're coming at it from a true critical thinking lens. So just because something sounds fantastical or sounds like science fiction, we don't dismiss it offhand. And in fact, these topics, like the UAP UFO topic, which you'll see a lot of my videos address on this channel. And in the last year, we have military intelligence officials coming forward, especially David Grusch, and going through official channels and saying there has been an 80-year cover-up of UFO crash retrievals, secret programs, alien biologics, all of this being taken very seriously by our United States government right now. So yeah, if we get confirmation of these allegations in the near future, I mean, we're going to be facing a paradigm where who knows what other secrets the government has kept hidden, or agencies within the government and private entities working with agencies within the government without the oversight of the appropriate parts of the government, the Congress. All of this stuff becomes relevant, and we're left to sift through it ourselves because the media ain't covering it, okay? So we have to go out and educate ourselves, and that is really why I started this channel, simply is because I'm reading all these books constantly, to be honest with you. It's just a passion of mine to read and take in information and entertain these ideas, these hypotheses, these theories that I see out there, we all see out there. But rather than just going, oh, well, it's just a idea, I don't know, or just somebody that said they saw that, no, let's look at it as an inquiry. Let's do critical inquiry and let's come to our own conclusions. How likely is this to be true? Does this exist? And of course, one of the tantalizing aspects of the whole UAP, UFO / conspiracy theory, term that's been co-opted and is just labeled to anything that questions the official consensus narrative is a conspiracy theory. But one of these topics that's very tantalizing is these deep underground military bases. And we hear all types of stories about them, right? Like people being taken down and shown crafts, UFO crafts, bodies in cold storage, secret meetings taking place, strange experiments taking place. All right. And so it becomes compelling to see if there's anything there, if there's a there. And what we find out actually is that these bases do exist. Now, we don't know what's exactly what's going on in them because these are top secret. They're classified. We wouldn't be able to find out what really goes on there as just public citizens. But these bases really do exist, and we're going to start to dive into that in this video here. And we're going to break it down and confine this video to here today is the origins of this. All right, in order to understand any kind of historical issue or look at a wider phenomena, it's very useful to get to the core, the origin of it, and develop an understanding there. You start to see the plausibility of what could develop over time. So before we get into that, I want to just show you where I'm getting this information from. And I actually highly recommend you just get this book and read this book yourself. It's not that long of a read, 200 pages. This is done by Richard Sauder, PhD. And what's great about this, and if you read this book, is that he is not just like spewing out conspiracy theories and trying to like argue some reality that's the truth. He simply was a PhD who decided to look into classified programs dealing with underground bases and tunnels. And everything that he shows in this book is strictly coming from documented sources, official government agency documentation, Army Corps of Engineer planning, blueprints and reports and proposals and all of this stuff, okay? And he's actually very skeptical. You read the book, he's very skeptical about UFOs, about aliens, and that there's these crazy things going on in underground bases like human abductions, aliens and humans working together, all this stuff that we've heard as rumors in the UFO literature. So he's very skeptical about that. But what's interesting is that you just look at what type of documentation someone can dig up. And this is not stuff that you just can find online by Googling it, right? This guy went to all of these archives and repositories and did Freedom of Information Act requests and appealed them and did all this, put in all this time to basically look into, in a critical, scholarly, academic way, are there secret underground bases and what could be going on there? So if you really want to start to expand your knowledge there and learn about that, highly recommend this book. This is where I'm going to be pulling from today. And again, he's pulling from official source documentation of government agencies and so forth, or private corporations working with the government, the different armed forces reports and studies and blueprints. So check this out. And again, this becomes important when we look at the larger picture of disclosure about UFOs and non-human intelligence, right? We think about how could they keep this secret for so long, right? Reverse engineering and retrieving crashed UFOs, sometimes massive UFOs. Well, if there's an elaborate underground system going on, this would be genius. And we're going to see here why they knew from the beginning in the 1940s that having a hidden, concealed underground bases is like the biggest military advantage you could think of, aside from, obviously, from technology and so forth. So this becomes relevant because if we're totally oblivious to what could be going on here, maybe we don't get full disclosure. But maybe some of this stuff just comes out as we get whistleblowers. If all of this stuff is true, David Grusch's claims, all this, we're living in it right now and seeing how it's going to unfold. So without further ado, let's now get into the history of secret underground military bases being built in the United States. And so for that, we jump to 1941. So what Richard Sauder discovered in 1941 was an FBI document, which was basically reporting that the Soviets, after World War II in 1945, were basically finding out that the Soviets were about to repurpose and use a Nazi base that was underground, and this was called Wolf's Lair. Now, you read the report, and it's crazy what this base was like in 1941. They say there in the first bullet point, seen from the surface, it was only an area of lakes and forests which covered the gigantic underground city, measuring 23 miles long and 2 to 3 miles wide. This is from an FBI document in 1941. So in the middle of Germany, they had this 23-mile long, 3 miles wide. That's big. That's a lot. 23 miles is big for an underground facility. 1941 in Germany, and you wouldn't even know it was there. As they say, there was lakes and forests that covered it. You would not even see it. So this is over 80 years ago. So imagine what could exist throughout this planet in remote areas on our own continent in North America and the United States here, under the ocean. Who knows? Okay, but I mean, this is what I mean by just looking at the documentation that Sauder presents in his book here. Come to your own conclusions, but it's certainly plausible and rational to think how much more advanced that could get. So, second bullet point. The document says, the underground military city is equipped with a communication system, electric power plants, water systems, officers' quarters, luxurious staff rooms, large military warehouses, garages, and underground hangars, all at a depth of at least 100 feet. So they had all of this stuff, right? Communication, electricity, water, places to live, military storage sites, and underground hangars. Again, especially in the 40s, if these UFO crash retrieval claims of David Grusch turn out to be true, real history, this would just make sense, right? What are you going to do with these things? Put them underground, start working on them underground, move them around underground through tunnel systems, and that's it. No adversary spying, whether it's the Soviets with their satellites or whatnot, are going to be able to be looking at what you're doing underground. So in 1945, the Soviets were rebuilding this base, the Wolf's Lair, in the former Nazi territory. We move forward a little bit here to 1949. And this information comes from a military journal that's circulated within the armed forces called Military Review. This is from May 1949, and an article titled, Should We Go Underground by a Lieutenant Colonel J.A. Goshorn. And this article mentions an underground factory in Sweden that was excavated deep into a mountain, employing 3,000 workers. So this article was arguing, why should the U.S. Armed Forces start making underground bases? And they mentioned this underground in the mountain facility in Sweden in the second bullet point here. Quote, as you approach this installation, the only man-made structure apparent to the unaccustomed eye is an innocent-looking Swedish farmhouse located at the foot of a hill. However, when the hinged walls of this house swing open, much like garage doors, there is an opening of sufficient size to accommodate large trucks. All right, so again, 1949, and this is something the average person would probably just think this is like from a movie, like a James Bond movie or something, right? In the middle of Sweden, this innocent-looking farmhouse is there, then the doors prop open and it leads into this huge underground inside of a mountain facility where there's 3,000 people secretly working. This sounds like science fiction, but again, this is a confirmed facility that exists in Sweden in 1949. And this is just a photo of something that might look like that. I couldn't find a photo of the actual place, but this is another place. The place mentioned in the FBI report, this is another inside of a mountain underground facility, the Boden Fortress in Sweden. Same time frame, 1948 to 49. We do have confirmation here, thanks to Richard Sauder and his persistence of the Los Alamos top secret underground base. Now, some background here, and we're going to look at what was going on there. But there was some background information here about how Richard Sauder got this information. He made a request to the Department of Energy's Albuquerque office at Sandia National Laboratories, which is affiliated with Kirtland Air Force Base and the Department of Energy and also AT&T. when he sent in the FOIA request, the first response he got was, "We have no responsive records to your requests were located." In other words, they said, "We don't have anything about any underground base at Los Alamos being built." And then Sauder appealed. He complained to the Department of Energy about Los Alamos, saying they don't have anything. And Los Alamos responded by giving him a really badly blurred photostatic copy of an article that was written in 1949 about Los Alamos Lab's unusual underground lab, which describes an underground laboratory built in the late 1940s. So that's how he got this information. Otherwise, and again, this just shows you this one person who had the time, the motivation to go pursue this as a research topic. Here we have the facts that, yes, in 1949, there was an underground base, top secret base built in Los Alamos, which is the topic of many UFO stories, alleged things going on at Los Alamos, UFO crash retrieval, reverse engineering, experiments, all types of things. We hear Los Alamos be brought up by some of these witnesses, these alleged witness whistleblowers. And then here you go, right? From this one effort of this one researcher, we find out that indeed they did build an underground base in 1949. And so sorry about that. Bear with me a moment here. Got the technology screwing us up a little bit here. Bear with me a moment. And here we go. So yeah, this Los Alamos base we have the names of the people that built it up there in the first bullet point. And in the second bullet point, it was bored into the cliffside of Los Alamos Canyon. So a lot of these early projects you see, they utilized mountains, cliffsides, crevices, cave systems even to kind of get started. And it had a main tunnel that could accommodate a large truck for 250 feet, series of 6 high security thick vault doors, and this was officially built to store nuclear materials, which they did have within this facility a, quote, pure physics lab associated with the, quote, W division. And this was in active use from 1949 until at least the mid-1980s. And like I was saying before, we have a lot of EBE, extrabiological entities, alien bodies, and crash retrieval rumors and claims about Los Alamos. And again, we know they had the facility there. We know that they had a pure physics lab and secrecy and security with these 6, vault doors and so forth, and nobody even knowing that it existed. So certainly if something did crash in the desert in Roswell in 1947, and then the other crash retrievals we've heard about right around that time, the late 40s, early 50s, well, Los Alamos would be a very logical place to go store one of these bodies and then start to figure out and get scientists in there and get them under NDAs and in top secret clearances and start to study this stuff. So there it is. I mean, the question is just, was it just a nuclear storage facility from 1949 until at least the mid-1980s? Has it been expanded on? Has it been connected through tunnels to other places? Or was it just a nuclear ammunition storage place in 1949? I mean, do we have reason to think that the government and the intelligence community and the branches of the military and private industry are telling us all that there is to know about these things? I think we have the proof that they don't, so we're left to, I think, conclude that it's plausible. It's plausible that if David Grusch's whistleblower allegations about UFO crash retrieval, reverse engineering, and study of non-human biologics has been taking place for 80 years, then something like Los Alamos is very plausible that that's might be where that happened. In very close in relation to Los Alamos, same time period, 1949, the Air Force builds the Kirtland Munitions Underground Storage Facility. This is in near Albuquerque, New Mexico, and miles of tunnels in the mountains There was a separate covert underground plant, tight security, top secret, 3,000 acres. And in the third bullet point, the entrance to the facility is via secure blast doors set into the mountain. Until recent years, armed police and jeeps patrolled the perimeter around the clock. So just another example of, it's a fact. They built this in 1949, and Kirtland has also been implicated in rumors, stories, and testimonies about secretive UFO crash retrieval versus engineering programs. And so we move a little bit further along in time here. And again, Richard Sauder is going all off of public information in the public domain or information that he was able to get through Freedom of Information Act requests. The true story is probably way more complex. There are probably lots of other projects and bases we don't know about, and maybe even go further back than 1949. But this is what we have to go on. 1957, Green Mountain in Huntsville, Alabama. That picture of that journal there is another journal, scientific journal, the Magazine of World Astronautics, Missiles and Rockets. And here in 1957, they're talking about an underground missile plant that would be built in Alabama. And it reported that the Army plans to build deep underground rocket factory and a, quote, subterranean junior Pentagon where elaborate headquarters would be installed. So here you go. Here's your science fiction movies of these secret underground elaborate facilities, 1957, being talked about. And the companies are listed there in the second bullet point. Third bullet point, a local group bought 200 acres for Chemstone, one of these corporations, to ship out excavated rock. So here's where Richard Sauder studied the paper trail, and it paints the picture, right? You have this being published, that the Army's going to build this elaborate underground base. Then you have a corporation on the public record buying acres to ship out excavated rock, right, for digging the base and building the base. And then in the last bullet point, Huntsville Industrial Expansion Committee engaged in 2 years of, quote, obscure real estate purchases in their own names or via proxies of, quote, various parcels of land scattered about Green Mountain. So, and in the sub-bullet point here, this is early evidence, a clear example of the U.S. military working through private industry. And so this kind of highlights the point that it's not, this whole subject, right, it's not just the government, right? Look, the government doesn't make bombs. The government doesn't make these bases. The government doesn't make its weapons, right? Private contractors do. The government, through government funds, puts out contracts, and these private industries bid and get the contracts and then carry them out. So they're the ones being involved in carrying out the operations to build these deep underground military bases, and we see a paper trail of that at least going back to 1957, which would be right in the heart of this era, the Eisenhower administration, and lots of things allegedly happening around this time, such as, some claims even that anti-gravity and human-made UFOs were operational by 1954. So, those claims. So we take that all into consideration here. 1959, this appears in the Air Force Times about a base in the Kennesaw Mountains in Georgia. This was an U.S. Air Force and U.S. Department of the Interior project to build an underground radar facility, again, inside of a mountain. Apparently that's a practical way of building these bases, is just to bore out the inside of a mountain. It's pretty cool when you think about it. It's also mind-boggling to think about how many remote places there are on this planet and huge, vast mountain ranges. And who knows what kind of top secret facilities you could have. And forget about the government. I mean, if you could just be a total private entity or collaboration of billionaires, and you could just do whatever you want, basically. And so who knows? That's what I like about this topic, is it gets your mind thinking about what could be going on if these underground bases have expanded, which we're certainly within reason to believe. Again, this is the origin segment here. We're just going to be looking from the 1940s to 1960, and then in part 2, we're going to see how much more it even expands based on the public domain literature. Second bullet point. This facility was only a few miles from Dobbins Air Force Base, and there's been some talk in Sauder's research, nothing confirmatory, that but that possibly it was tunneled and excavated from there, the Dobbins Air Force Base, or that's what this, article was suggesting. Now, we get into another interesting group in this whole underground base research, and that is the RAND Corporation. And if you've been around in the UFO field enough, you've definitely seen RAND be coming out before. This is a private corporate group that has worked on many contracts, specifically with the Navy, but also other armed forces and departments, agencies of the U.S. government. So they have this symposium in 1959, and the title of this symposium they have is, quote, "Protecting Military Installations Located Deep Underground or Under Mountains." So there you go, 1949, a leading corporate organization and think tank having a whole symposium about deep underground construction. You can see the original project report there. So the chairman at the symposium for RAND states that they spent 2 years investigating the need for, quote, "super hard, deep underground centers." And they produce a 2-volume report of dozens of papers about tunneling and underground excavation. They call on experts from Princeton University, RAND Corporation, Colorado School of Mines, Army Corps of Engineers, University of Illinois, National Bureau of Standards, Ballistic Research Laboratories, Brown University, and quote, assortment of independent consultants and private firms. So, boom, there you have it there. In plain sight, the RAND Corporation doing elaborate studies requiring funding and time and investment, and all of these organizations that they just talked about building deep underground military bases, 1959. And then they follow that up in 1960 by suggesting 12 locations for deep underground military bases, DUMBs. And yes, that was a term popularized later on in the ufology arena by Phil Schneider. But really, we can see that that type of language was being used in 1959 by RAND and the military. Now, these 12 sites, RAND suggested, were all to be more than 1,000 feet underground. And that's why it's a deep underground military bases, more than 1,000 feet underground. And these 12 locations included one of them in Alaska, which is very interesting. One of these in the Kenai Peninsula in southern Alaska. And then in the third bullet point there, you see the other areas where these sites were recommended: Arizona, California, Colorado, Michigan, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio, and Illinois. So, next up here, more evidence. We move on from RAND and suggesting all of that. And here's the thing that we do have to keep in mind, right, is a lot of the information, and Sauder even talks about it in the book, a lot of the information is just clear-cut studies, plans, and proposals saying, we've found this to be feasible, we've confirmed this is what we recommend. That type of stuff was available on the public domain, but what happened next is like what the part of the missing story is, right, is did they build them? Did they actually build these bases? And that's where we don't have, at least for some of these DUMBs, we have the other ones, and that's going to be in part 2 or part 3. Actually, in part 2, we're going to talk about the ones that we actually know 100% they built and what they do and what's there and what's happening on the official record. But anyway, moving along here with the last bits of evidence about this period from the 1940s until 1960s. So again, at this same critical period, you see all the dots here you can connect. The RAND Corporation with their symposium in 1959 and then their suggestions in 1960. The building of the underground base in 1957 in Alabama, right? And now you have the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and their training manuals. And you'll see if you read the Sauder book, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers seems to be a very central group in this whole underground military base development in the United States. So, first bullet point, they produce a 5-part series titled Design of Underground Installations in Rock. And these manuals are training military engineers for the construction and maintenance of underground facilities. It states that, quote, vital governmental installations have been placed underground. So there's your primary source information that unofficial, or rather not fully publicly disclosed underground bases were built according to the 1959 to 1961 U.S. Army Corps of Engineer training manuals. These places were built and they were training them on how to continue building them. Third bullet point, among the list of types of operations to go underground: communication centers, research facilities, storage areas, and hospitals. I want to pause real quick there to think about those in connection with the UFO and UAP field. Again, if David Grusch's whistleblower claims of an 80-year UFO crash retrieval reverse engineering program and alien biologics being studied and continuing right now to be, again, this was in official U.S. congressional hearings a year ago and is currently continuing to be investigated, and the Inspector General of the Intelligence Community of the United States, the government deemed these claims I'm citing here from David Grusch as credible and urgent. So if that proves to be true for us in the general public, look here at what they were building in 1959 to 1961. Communication centers. What kind of communication, right? Communicating with non-human intelligence, maybe. Research facilities. What kind of research? Reverse engineering the propulsion and energy methods of these crafts, and who knows what other kind of technology and applications of the technology. Storage areas, storing what? Massive 50 or 300 foot wide crafts that people have been reporting seeing, hundreds and thousands of people. Hospitals, what could they use hospital facilities for? Genetic experimentation, alien autopsies, right? If all these things that are, admittedly seeming far-fetched and wild on the surface, even though we have the official claims, like I keep saying, if they turn out to be factual, well, I mean, look, we had the facilities there in 1959 being built. So the last bullet point on this page, sub-bullet point in the report, it says, quote, more important equipment and facilities essential to defense may be installed in deeper workings that are, quote, likely to be long and tunnel-like, occupying one or several stories. AKA, this, honestly, I think about this video that I'm sharing here, if you want to know, are dumbs just, conspiracy lore, ufology, what's his name, Phil Schneider, or are they real? Well, look at this straight from the U.S. Army Corps Engineer training manuals. And, come to your own conclusion there. So, what we are going to do here, actually, is we're going to pause. Whoa! We're going to pause here, because that basically brings us up to 1960. And we've looked at some good evidence here that hopefully you can evaluate and come to your own conclusions. I think it's clear that these were being built late 40s, 50s, into the early 60s. U.S. Army Corps of Engineers were being trained to build these. They had the intentions of setting them up for all the facilities we just talked about in the last slide. And yeah, so, I mean, let me know what your conclusions are on that information. Let me know any questions. Let me know any thoughts. Let me know anything else that you know of or have heard of about this topic, about this time period we looked at today. In part 2, we're going to be looking at the expansion of this. All right, we get up to that 1960 period. From 1960 up into the 90s, we see there's a lot of very interesting further documentation about more and more building of these bases and specific features of them and recommendations of how to hide and conceal them and all this other stuff. So hopefully you got some value there from this information. Please like it. Please subscribe if you haven't. Share it with people. Leave your comments. I know that you hear that in all these YouTube videos, but it actually really does make a difference. Otherwise, YouTube shows my videos to like 5 people Sometimes it shows it to hundreds or thousands, but it seems to really don't have any rhyme or reason. But allegedly, apparently the likes and so forth do help it. So thank you for watching. We'll dive into more expansion on this topic with part 2. We'll get that out in the next day or two. And thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.